Now, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk obviously about the legal decision, what it means. We're also going to put a human face on this. For months now, we've been covering this, and Dominic has spoken to the people in the front lines, not just the attorneys, but the real people who have been on the other end. And we've also talked to law enforcement who have been the ones who have been conducting and carrying out these policies. Then we're also going to get into politics of it. I don't think it's lost on any of you that we're in the middle of a mayoral election right now, and the decision by the court and how to look at it. And by the way, the police commissioner, who might be the head of our Homeland Security Department potentially, there's all the political elements that come into this. But Dom, let me come back to the legal of this. This was an interesting case for all the different reasons we'll talk about. But one is, the facts weren't really in debate, in that everybody agreed what they were doing. Now, why they were doing it, the effectiveness of it, that was up for question. But it wasn't like the mayor and the police commissioner debated where the cops were going. It wasn't like the plaintiffs were saying, hey, they're only going here or there. Everybody admitted it. It just depended, I guess, on your perspective as to what is or is not justice, and when does the means justify the ends, right?
Exactly on point, the way you just summed this up. I sat in that courtroom on the 15th floor of the federal courthouse building, and all it took was sitting there, Richard, for one day. Judge Scheinlin was not having it. The city came forward with about 10, 15 lawyers, and nobody had an argument to rationalize why exactly what you just said. The numbers were not in dispute. They couldn't get around that. So what did the city do? Oh, well, we had to have quotas because we have lazy cops. This is what they really said. This is what the city literally said. We have lazy cops, and we have to monitor that they get out of the cars and that they do their work, and that's why we have the 250 forms for them to fill out, and this is why they have to have X amount of arrests, X amount of stops, X amount of this to make sure that they're doing their jobs. Hogwash, the judge didn't buy it. The bottom line, Richard.
You know, Andrew, you've done a lot of the numbers in this one, but for me, what struck me was, I looked at Mayor Bloomberg, and maybe it's me, and I looked at Ray Kelly, and I don't see two guys who get up in the morning with a racist agenda going on, right? They firmly believe, you could see them when they were up there. How dare you guys ascribe to me any motives other than trying to keep the city straight? And they said, hey, the numbers are down. Violent crime way down in this city. And if you look at the amount of guns that were used in crimes before versus now. But the more we went into it, the more you looked at the numbers and you said, wait a second, some things aren't adding up here. When they did community policing, the same commissioner, the same mayor before, violent crimes also went down, even a greater percentage than before Stop-and-Frisk. And then they went through the numbers that if of the people they stopped, if you were white, there was a greater chance that you actually had either drugs or a weapon on you than if you were black. And nobody disputed that 9 out of 10 times when they got stopped, they said, never mind, they let them go. It seemed that passionately they felt strongly about what they were doing was working, but the numbers didn't seem to back up that it was the right way to do it.
And you can even add some other numbers to it, which is that violent crime is down all over the country, even in communities where they're not employing stop and frisk or stop, question, and frisk, depending on your perspective, or that this year when they reduced the number of stops and frisks, you did not see a spike in the number of violent crimes or in the number of guns that were found on the street. They did say several times that they thought this was constitutional according to the rulings of the Supreme Court, and I'm curious, Mayo, what ruling are they referring to where they're saying that stop, question, and frisk has been upheld by the Supreme Court?
Well, I think that Terry v. Ohio, you have to have a reasonable basis to stop the people, though. You don't simply go in and just stop someone. So again, and
we
no
just heard the mayor say, they go with an area, the second half of his answer, and anybody basically fits the description. You three guys fit the description, okay? If you follow his logic as to when you go in there. So it's part of the zip code. If you're living in the zip code, it comes with the territory in effect, and they're not coming to my zip code, but it keeps crime down. And that was basically the argument. It's working, so sorry, but it comes with the territory.
Well, I would even add that it's the mayor saying that we need to have a chilling effect on our citizens, because what the mayor is really saying, and it was telling, he said it himself, is that if you happen to have a gun, you're going to think twice about carrying it because you know you could be stopped essentially for no reason whatsoever. And that's a chilling effect. You could stop anybody in the United States. If we just had a broad net and stopped every single person in the United States, we'd be building jails and courthouses.
And we're going to be talking about the justice system later, but last legal question from me, which was, for the policy to be upheld, it had to be viewed as voluntary, okay? And as we've had many guests in the program, nobody thought that if a cop said, hey, you, right, that you said, yeah, right, and kept walking, it was going to end well. That it wasn't an optional kind of thing. Hands up here, and you'd be stopped, you'd be patted down and everything. And that was a key component, at least when I read the judge's finding, right?
Well, a person's under arrest when a reasonable person who's innocent would feel that they are no longer free to leave. And when we argue that to challenge whether statements should come in, if Miranda hasn't been given, it's liberally construed to say that, well, really, you weren't under arrest. So an officer may testify and say, well, he wasn't under arrest. You say, well, could he leave? Of course he couldn't leave. He's in the back of a police car and the door doesn't open unless that officer opens it from the outside. You're there. So at the end of the day, basically what you're saying is you're taking an entire community, and not just the people who live in these zip codes, but the people who visit them also. You could be working and making a delivery there, working for a courier service, and you happen to be there. You're subject to being stopped and frisked. And you're telling people from birth until the day that they leave this earth that they're always essentially going to be a suspect.
And there's two different classes of citizens when
Absolutely.
it comes down to it. Okay, we jump to our break, and when we come back, we're going to bring the pastor in our conversation to put a human face on this, what this means for the communities, what the decision meant, and also what the policy really said to different people that look differently. Now, we want you at home to be a part of our conversation, so go online, go to Facebook and Twitter and sound off. We told you the highlights of the judge's decision here. Stop and frisk found unconstitutional. Did you agree with the judge here? When we come back, we'll talk about the impact this policy has had on specifically minority communities in New York. Today's decision, well, it might change that. We'll talk about what that also means after this.
If 90% of the people are in favor of any one tactic, that means 800,000 people are against it. So if you want to go out and find somebody to put on your television show, you can do it. That doesn't have anything to do with what's really going on. And also, the public are not experts at policing. Personally, I would rather have Ray Kelly decide how to keep my family safe than somebody who's just in the streets and say, oh, I don't like that.